What's going on, guys? It's MangaxHunter here, and today I have the start of a new series that I'm bringing to this channel. So I read a lot of manga every month, and I wanted to do something that I get to talk a little bit more in depth on some of the series I'm reading. Not as in depth as some of my reviews, but also not as shallow as some of my hauls when I just briefly touch on some series. So that's going to be the purpose of these videos. Each month I'm going to highlight a few series that I've been reading and talk about why I would recommend them to you and things that I'm loving about them as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started for the month of January. The first series that I've been reading this month that I want to highlight is JoJos Part 2. So I read Part 1, Phantom Blood, about 5 or so months ago, and I really did not enjoy it that much. I thought it was alright. I thought Jonathan, the main character, was pretty boring, kind of a wimp, very one-dimensional, and I thought the story wasn't exciting either. So I was pretty hesitant to pick up Part 2 despite so many people telling me JoJo's gets so much better each part as it goes on. So despite me not enjoying Part 1, I decided to pick up Part 2, and I finished it this month, and I absolutely love it. Right off the bat, Joseph is such a more intriguing, fun, and interesting protagonist than Jonathan was in Part 1. Not only that, but all the side characters are way more enjoyable as well. We have Caesar, we have Lisa, and also the villains and the antagonists are really fantastic as well. Specifically Weamu, who's very unapologetic about his beliefs and very honorable. Despite his conflict with Joseph, he still honors him as an opponent and has great respect for him. So the characters are immediately something that is improved on Part 1. Not only that, you see a lot more innovation with the story and also the fighting. We get the concept of Hammond introduced in Part 1, and it's really kind of just used as a way to strengthen the character's power. But in Part 2, that's where you really get to start to see the creativity of Hammond and how it can be manifested in different weapons, and how Joseph uses it with his little clanging balls. I don't know the term for the weapon he uses. But overall, I enjoyed Part 2 so much more than I did Part 1. I ended up picking the rest of JoJo's that's currently up to date. And in fact, I'm currently reading Part 3 right now, and I'm loving it just as much as well. For those of you who read Part 1 and did not enjoy it, I would highly recommend picking up Part 2, giving that a shot, and I think at that point, if you still aren't enjoying JoJo's, it's probably not for you. But Part 2, I loved it, and I'm so glad I decided to pick it up. The second series that I've been reading this month is Mob Psycho 100. So One Punch Man is one of my favorite series that I own in my collection. Not only do I love the action, but I think the writing and the comedy is just so spot on and just the type of humor that I enjoy. So this month I decided to read Mob Psycho volumes that I have in my collection, and I've been absolutely loving it. The art is pretty off-putting at first. It looks really clunky with not much detail and kind of bad, but as I was reading the series, I noticed how, despite it at first seeming bad, the artwork actually adds to the comedy so much. It makes the jokes and the subtle humor land that much more. Mob is such a fun main character who is so awkward that the humor involved around his character and around other people who are trying to take advantage of him is just so funny. There's the main fight that happens in the third volume that pretty much takes up the entire volume, was so well written and was so hilarious. The main thing that it keeps me coming back to the series is just the comedy, and the action is really cool too. It's the type of series that if you were just to see panels of the art, you might think it's not good and not worth picking up, but I would highly advise against that. I would say pick up the first volume, read through it, and I'm more than willing to bet that you're going to find a lot to love about Mob Psycho 100. The next series that I want to highlight from this month is No Longer Human by Junji Ito. Junji Ito isn't really my favorite manga because I'm not that big of a horror fan, but I decided to pick up No Longer Human because the novel by Osamu Dazai is so beloved in Japan, and I've heard so many great things about it that I figured I should go ahead and pick it up. This was a volume, despite being relatively thick, that I was able to read in one sitting. The story is so dark and so gripping that I really was just burning through the pages as I was reading it. Ito typically does series that have to do with demons or some type of scary being, but the real pull of No Longer Human is that Junji is diving into the idea that true horror comes from human beings, and you can see that through the life of our main character. Through these awful things that are happening to him and his reliance on drugs and alcohol and other worldly pleasures, you see how dark of this rabbit hole he goes down and how eventually he's so lost and corrupt and dark that he's no longer human, where the title comes from. This is a volume that has seriously stuck with me since I finished it. So many awful things happen to this boy as he's growing up, and when I found out that this series was semi-autobiographical for Osamu's real life, the author of the novel, I was genuinely shocked. This is by no means a light read, and so I would recommend it if you're in the mood for something dark or more mature, but I can't recommend picking this up enough. It's a quick read, one that you will not be forgetting anytime soon. And the last series I want to highlight from this month is the Quintessential Quintuplets. This is a story that has a relatively simple premise. We see our main character Futaro and a mysterious girl that he is walking down the aisle to marry. You're introduced to 5 sisters or quintuplets that all look they all look very similar. So you're told at the beginning of the story that Futaro marries one of these sisters, but you don't know who. So coming back to when they first meet, Futaro is put in charge of being the tutor for these 5 sisters, and through his journey of teaching them, eventually falls in love with one of them, and it's kind of up to the reader to guess and figure out who is that sister he ends up marrying. Now, while it seems like a relatively silly premise, the story definitely is silly, but it's really cute, really endearing, and a really fun read. There's a lot of emotional moments with these sisters, as well as really giddy and silly moments too. I genuinely did not expect to love this series as much as I do. You kind of get to root for and be a fan of one of the sisters, and that's kind of the fun of this series, because each of them kind of has a similar chance of being the one that Futaro marries. The art is really great in this series, really fun, great dialogue and humor, and silly situations that the sisters get into with Futaro, and it's kind of up to him to bring them together and help them pass their exams. But I would definitely recommend this if you're in the mood for a lighter read with some comedy and just a lot of cuteness overall. So that's going to do it for this month, guys. This is just some of the series that I've been reading and I wanted to talk to you about and recommend, despite me doing a full review for each series. But let me know if you like this idea of a channel series that I should do going forward. And I really wanted to talk more about manga, but doing a full review for a series is pretty time consuming and pretty taxing, but I figured this would be a good idea to not only go a little bit more in depth and give you some idea of why the series is good, but also not spend too much time on each series. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more. Peace.